I'm working on two different style of Hayward sand filter valves today. This one was on a 300-pound sand filter and this one's on a 500-pound sand filter. And the gaskets have gone bad inside, so I bought some gasket kits. This kit for this one here and this kit here for this one. This one is a SP0714T1. This one is a SP071620T. Now on this one, the 20T is a complete valve with the gasket and the gauge and everything. If you get the SP071621T, it's just the valve itself without the gauge and the gasket and the O-ring. So before you take all the screws out around these, you need to put this one in a winterized mode. This one has a notch for it. Basically, it's just pushing this valve down like that. It's keeping the spring up. I'll show you in this one here. So it's just compressing the spring to lift this up off of the base. This one here does not have a winterized mode, so you need to put it in between one of the notches. Put it on top of this flat part here so it compresses that spring. Also, for aligning the top piece to this piece, this one has a notch right here. So this notch and that has to match up. This one doesn't have that. This one here has two flats right here. So you got to line up these flats. So when you take this off, you'll know where it goes back. On this valve here, I'll pull it out. This is where your gasket is on this valve. And if you can see, it's wore out right here and right here and a little bit right there. So we're going to replace this gasket. This one looks like it'll be easier than this one. This one here, there is no gasket on this part. It's in the bottom here. And on this one, you can see this rolled over and this one rolled over. And it was causing water to leak out of my pool and go through the backwash line. Now, one thing I did on my pool, which I'll show you in a video later, is on the backwash line, this line that comes out here, I put another valve right here so I would not lose pool water. So while you're waiting on this part, which this part, I bought a replacement one, the whole thing. I couldn't find one for like 6 months and they finally came out again. So in the meantime, I put a valve here to cut the water from going out the backwash to save pool water. Since my pool is 17 years old, this will be the second time I've had to do this. Some people recommend not putting any adhesive on the gasket. Some people do, and if you do, use this 4799. It's made by 3M. But for this stuff, I don't think it's really necessary. This is just my opinion. I don't think it's necessary to put it around the outer edge or in the inner edge. I think you just need to put a little bit on these sections here because this is what gets, that's what gets rolled over. And they usually roll over from not letting the pump stop all the way and then you're flipping the valve around. I always go in a clockwise position when I do the valve. I never go clockwise and then counterclockwise. I never do that. I always go in a clockwise position, but it still rolled them out. So hopefully this adhesive will hold these in place. So to start with, I'm just gonna yank this one out of here. I had a little bit of adhesive there and there and there and there, but I gotta clean all this up. So if you have this style of valve, it's gonna be hard to get this out. I was using a screwdriver to pick it out and it is stuck. So you may have to use a hair dryer. Just warm it up enough. Don't melt any plastic. This won't melt plastic, but just warm it up enough to get the adhesive a little less sticky and maybe you can pull it out easier. The screwdriver I started with was a little wider than the slot that it was in, so I grabbed this screwdriver. And let's see. That looks like it'll come out easier that way. Just work myself around like this. I prefer to use some plastic, but this is all I have on hand, so work my way around. Do a little bit at a time. On the straight ones, I can just push straight down on the straight lines instead of doing that little wobble thing I was doing. So what I found is the hairdryer does make it go a lot easier. So just keep some heat on it. You can keep this hairdryer on there pretty close and just heat it up really well, and it'll come out a lot easier. And if you notice on the new gasket, it's got these little, I'll just call them pins, little pins sticking up. You got one here and one here that go in these holes. You'll have to dig these two holes out too, so those little pins will fit in there. So what you can do is take a small brush like this with some alcohol or something to begin with and go around and just rub this around, just clean it out a little bit. You can take a piece of the old rubber, some of this, and just push it down in there and then pull it around. It grabs a hold of some of the old rubber and rolls it, and it'll clean it out a little. So on this valve here, the SP0714T1, you don't have to do it the way I did. You don't have to just buy this cheap gasket. This is a cheaper way to go. You can go a more expensive way, which it runs from like, I saw from $30 to about $70 for this piece here that already has a gasket on it. It's a much easier way to go. You just basically compress this and then push that pin out, and then this piece will come off and you can put your other piece on. But I went the cheap route and put the gasket in myself. So if you want to buy just this piece for that valve, that one is the, where is it? This SP0714CA, the key seal assembly. It's that piece in there. So that would be an easier way to go if you don't want to glue it. Since I videoed already, I'm not going to redo that part of the video, so I want to point out my mistake. I ordered the wrong gasket. This is for a different unit, so I didn't notice that. I must have clicked on the wrong link. Anyway, I'm ordering a new gasket for this one. I'll finish that one later, but I'm gonna continue on this one. We're gonna go ahead and start with the adhesive, spreading the adhesive around. We're doing it the cheap way. We're doing it the $7 way. This is like a $7 gasket, and we're just gonna glue it in. This stuff here is expensive. You don't need a tube this big. You can buy the really, really small tube. So this stuff here, we'll just put a little bit in different places, and then I'm gonna spread it around with this foam brush. Boy, that stuff is sticky. It says apply it right away. It doesn't say to wait or anything. So put some in there like that. See if I can spread it out with a brush. It looks like it spreads it pretty good with this. So I'm just going to do the inner part first. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we'll install this piece. Put that hole there. It's got those pins that line up into those holes. Bring those around there. And now I'm going to go around the outer edge. Just put a little bit, spread as thin as I can. Alright. Take that brush, go around. Alright, let's stretch this one. Put that in. Stretch this side. Now let's work on this section. And then all we have left is this right here. After you get that on, wipe off any excess that you got on the outside of this thing. So on this same valve here, this body right here, I noticed that these edges are really sharp. They're like razor blades. They feel really sharp. So I was going to take some 400 grit and just smooth over the edges. This is just my opinion. Make sure you do not sand on the flat part, just on the edges. But this is my opinion that would probably help a little bit to keep that gasket from rolling out of there. But before I put this back together, I'm going to put some pool lube, Spawn lube on this gasket all the way around this. So now it's time to put this valve back together. I still have this one in winterizing position. Yeah, it means the spring is compressed and this is up. And then I have a notch here and a notch here I have to line up. And then when you put it back in, you got to make sure that pin in the center lines up. Squeeze it back together, put your screws in, and then I'm finished with this one. Now, when my correct part comes in on that one, I'll put that one together. Now that I got the correct part in, I can continue on this one. This one matches up, so got to make sure it's a 6.5 inch gasket, the width of it is. This one I actually bought a Hayward. I did not buy an aftermarket one. I wanted to get the correct one. Be careful on eBay, you might get the wrong part. So, all right, so got it cleaned up, ready to go. Now I'll put some adhesive in it and put the gasket in. I'm gonna start putting adhesive in the straight slots here. Just a little bit up here around this edge. Maybe a little bit here, not much. Maybe a little bit on this side. Spread it around with this. Just like I did on the other one. That should be good to go to put the gasket in. So what I'm doing here is I'm moving I moved the valve to this position in between backwash and closed. I put it in between there because that'll put this section on top of this section here, because I have this notch here and this notch here I have to line up. So when I screw this together, I'm gonna put it on backwash and let the spring push down on the gasket. Now that I got all the screws put back in, I'm gonna push this back to the backwash notch. Let the spring go down. It's sitting on top of the gasket. It's sitting on most of the gasket vanes. There's just one of them that's not going to sit on, I guess. And we'll let that dry for 24 hours. I'll probably take it back apart, check it, make sure nothing got messed up, and then put it back together and then have it good to go for the pool season. And when you take it back apart to inspect the gasket after it's been 24 hours, don't forget to lube the gasket material and then put it back together. Now after doing all this work, this valve is not so bad. You have to buy the gasket for this one unless you want to buy the whole thing, which is around 260 to 300 bucks. I would just buy the $7 gasket, or this one was actually a $20 gasket. A $20 gasket for this one. The other valve, instead of gluing the gasket in, I think I would rather just buy the complete piece on the bottom and then compress the spring, put the new piece in, and put the pin in. That would be a better way to go than to remove the gasket. But this is a way to show you to just do the gasket. And here's something you can do in the meantime while you're waiting on your valve to come in or your parts to come in. I have an extra valve now, but if your pool is leaking down because it's going through the backwash here, and leaking through the valve to the backwash, you can just install a cutoff here to make the water stay in the pool instead. This is something I do when I transfer pipes from one valve to another valve. I just put a hose clamp on here to keep these valves from splitting, because these valves are too expensive. You don't want the pipe to split. If you over tighten this pipe, it could split, and these will help prevent that.